Nintendo is ambitious. It proved this by bringing a game like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to a portable system, but the step it has taken with Tears of the Kingdom pushes all boundaries. We have played what is probably the most immense adventure ever in video games, something so insane and disproportionately large that you won't believe it until you see it with your own eyes. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notifications. Here's our review of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for Nintendo Switch. Tears of the Kingdom is the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Not quite a Breath of the Wild 2. Roughly speaking, you could say it's more of the same. We didn't expect anything else from a sequel, but it has been able to amplify the formula, change some things, and make you see, once again, that the first Zelda game on Nintendo Switch was a masterpiece. It feels like no time has passed, and the first impression you get from Tears of the Kingdom is that you're playing an expansion or DLC for Breath of the Wild, but with absurdly large dimensions and even more possibilities. This new Zelda game begins a few years after the events that took place in Breath of the Wild, though Nintendo's intention with this game is that it can be enjoyed by all players, even if they don't know the story of the prequel. This has led to some inconsistencies in the game. The characters are barely aware of their own story, and because it's trying to avoid any spoilers about what happened in Breath of the Wild, it doesn't move forward in that direction, opting instead for a completely new plot. Important characters from the first game are barely mentioned, and the former main enemy seems to have never existed. Anyone who played Breath of the Wild will wonder what has happened to the characters to make them ignore their own history. These are decisions designed to make the game more accessible that have an impact on the way of telling its story. In Breath of the Wild, we had a plot focused on the memory and evolution of the characters in an emergency situation. The Tears of the Kingdom is the opposite. In pursuit of an epic story, the evolution of the characters is sacrificed. They have their own motivations, but their story arcs are based on the decisions they make, and not so much on their personal growth. We won't have a Princess Zelda frustrated for not achieving her goals and feeling guilty for disappointing her father, or a love-struck Mipha who with every scene saw Link getting closer to her. For some, the story of Tears of the Kingdom will be Zelda's most special and daring, and for others, it'll be the trigger that bombards the entire lore of the series by taking some licenses to bend its own rules. On a personal note, we did like it. It would have been great if there was a little more evolution in the characters as they had in Breath of the Wild, but the final sensations with the sequel have been very similar. Nintendo Switch can no longer handle its own games. The console released in 2017 with hardware that wasn't particularly cutting edge in terms of power. As a result, developers have had to figure out how to bring impressive technical features and open worlds to the table with incredible results. Well, not all of them. 6 years later, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom arrives, being without a doubt the most powerful and best optimized game on Nintendo Switch. A world much more immense than Breath of the Wild's Hyrule runs with no loading times to leave us open-mouthed after descending from the skies to even underground. The result is a game that is graphically very similar to Breath of the Wild, with some noticeable improvements in lighting and draw distance. With artwork reminiscent of Japanese animation, Tears of the Kingdom maintains a color aesthetic that is not too saturated, opting to show a contrast between the darkness of the underground and the brightness and illumination of Hyrule skies. In addition, we are given the tools to modify the lighting in dark places to our liking, not with high precision, but with very good and natural finishes. It is clear that if the hardware were more powerful, better results could be obtained, especially to mitigate the consequences of the extreme optimization. The maximum resolution of the game is 900p, varying accordingly to the processing load on screen, but with limited minimum values. Once these values are reached, performance drops in a controlled manner. From our technical analysis, we've seen that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom aims to maintain a stable 30 frames per second, dropping to 20 frames at times. This is especially the case when transparencies and meshes appear on the ground when using Link's various powers. Performance is on par with Breath of the Wild. The low resolution and loss of frames per second is annoying at times, but it's manageable and doesn't detract from the gameplay experience. The only technical downside we have are some poorly placed loading times at the entrance entrance of the shrines, making us believe that they won't exist or will be very short, as in Bayonetta, but the screen goes black. In that sense, we'd prefer it if they use the same kind of trick, something similar to a lift like in Breath of the Wild, so this would be more unnoticed. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is all about personality. It's based on Breath of the Wild, and the sky areas are very reminiscent of Immortal's main color palette, but it sets itself apart with impressive underground areas and a terrifying, hair-raising final stretch. At times, we really felt a lot of tension when reaching certain places, because the atmosphere has been one of the most improved things in this new Zelda game for Switch. Breath of the Wild used a piano in its soundtrack as the main element, going quite unnoticed to camouflage itself with the ambient sound. In Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo takes a step forward to get more out of its own creations and be more daring. The result has been truly spectacular. The soundtrack of this game, along with its sound effects, are not only tasteful and perfectly matched to the artwork, they have also been used to experiment with incredible new sounds that magnify the dark undertones of the game. It's also dubbed in a host of languages, including English and Spanish, both of which have an excellent quality and feel a little more natural than those seen in Breath of the Wild. Zelda created a distinct brand with Breath of the Wild. The gameplay changed radically from Skyward Sword and brought many new players to the series, even though Zelda, before Breath of the Wild, was something different. Tears of the Kingdom continues the sandbox premise, giving the player a gigantic world to explore, now more vertical than ever, and a new set of tools and abilities to make that experience feel very different. As in most open world games, we will be able to move around with our character to explore new locations and advance the plot. We'll have objectives in the form of main and side quests that'll provide a bit of guidance even if the game invites you to get lost. This means that, like the first one, you try to play for 10 minutes and end up playing for 2 hours. Tears of the Kingdom is even more fun than Breath of the Wild, with more territory to explore and more possibilities. New powers allow us to move objects around, go through ceilings, combine objects, and turn back time on specific items. The selection feels like a series of discards from the first game, something we don't dislike, but it's not as distinctive or brilliant as Breath of the Wild. Ascend is very situational, and the surfaces where it can be used must meet certain conditions that don't occur as often as we would like. With the Ultra Hand, we can move things at a distance, but not use it directly on objects to hit enemies, something that Magnesis had and that we missed in Tears of the Kingdom. This is acceptable because its real purpose is construction, and you can glue objects together, although you may find it a chore and opt for other solutions to solve the puzzles. We're concerned that many of the puzzles can be solved with a combination of the Ultra Hand and Recall, allowing you to create moving platforms as you like and break a lot of the game's puzzles. We have literally skipped large sections of the game using this simple technique, because having many solutions to the same problem also has to include having some limitations, and in Tears of the Kingdom there are no limits, both for better and for worse. The key to making this work in the game's physics engine, which is a few points better than the one in the prequel and stands as the best we've ever seen in video games. Many weapons and item types have been removed from Breath of the Wild in order to use fuse. Put an arrow and a bomb together and you'll get a bombero. A shield with a mushroom will explode like a smoke bomb when hit, and swords will gain elemental powers with some items. These are just a few examples of a tool that we've loved, giving absurd results like weapons sticking to other weapons and making you want to gouge your eyes out when you see what you just created. This is the only power that actually feels useful in battle, detracting from the skills in classic Zelda combat. And it's not aesthetically pretty in most cases, but it's fun to see what comes out of these combinations. The game has a structure that's almost exactly the same as Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you played the previous game, you'll realize that the originality has been dumped entirely on new tools and innovative locations, because it's impossible not to feel a certain sense of drudgery at having to do the same kinds of main tasks from the previous adventure all over again. Thankfully, Nintendo has given more variety to the world of Hyrule, so it doesn't feel the same, with millions of things to do and multiple ways to approach them. We think Nintendo has given the scientific Breath of the Wild players the toy they wanted with Tears of the Kingdom. Particularly missed is the stasis skill, which built up kinetic energy and then released it. This power was specifically created to get the most out of the physics engine, and without without it, we feel an important point has been missed. They have been brave in making a complicated and challenging Zelda game. We've noticed an increase in difficulty in the series that may catch many players off guard, but we felt it was necessary and will end up adding to the fun. The main story, if you cut to the chase, can take around 50 hours to complete, but as we said, this is a title so immense in size and content that you could lose yourself in it for hundreds of hours, experience and seeing everything it has to offer. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is an innovative game in its own way, not because of its premise, which is a carbon copy of the prequel, but because of the way it does things. You're bound to think it's more and better, and you wouldn't be wrong. It is much more and different, with a concept further removed from what Zelda is, and exploring new grounds in a gigantic playground that extends to the absurd. Now, as well as exploring the gigantic kingdom of Hyrule, we can also visit islands scattered in the sky that we'll have to figure out how to get to, whether it's by building vehicles, using Link's abilities, or even the environment. Interestingly, construction itself is relatively constrained by a limited number of parts types, as well as the use of batteries. In this regard, the beaten-up Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts did something similar and really well on Xbox. With all the options that are given to solve the puzzles or defeat enemies, one of the last things that you'll tend to use is construction due to its tedium efficiency of the process. We were very surprised by Hyrule's underground and the depth of it. If Breath of the Wild already had a great verticality in its gameplay, Tears of the Kingdom reaches points we didn't think could be done in this console. Underground, the setting changes completely to offer a different experience in the sky and Hyrule. Including this is simply superb. The Koroks and their crazy challenge of finding hundreds of them around the world are back. This translates into mini puzzles that, along with the side quests and other collectibles, make for a lengthy and entertaining experience that makes the hours fly by. We found the construction of Hyrule and the implementation of the classic dungeons to be very original and natural within the framework of Tears of the Kingdom itself. Despite following the same structure with a few surprises in between, the final result has left us very satisfied. When you put something huge together and you try to make it even bigger, you get a monster like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's incredible the size and content this game has to offer. It's something so crazy that until you play it, you really won't understand or believe it, let alone that it runs so smoothly on Nintendo Switch. More isn't always better, and in this case, it's different. Zelda Breath of the Wild can boast a brilliant combination of powers, some of which are missed in Tears of the Kingdom. We worry that the multiple solutions to problems lead to an excess of freedom that means most puzzles can be solved with a simple combination of Ultra Hand and Recall. And looking at the things players did with Breath of the Wild, it's scary to think what they might do with Tears of the Kingdom, because breaking it down and skipping key parts seems easier than ever. This game is gonna give Zelda fans the epic storyline they've been asking for, leaving aside the evolution and growth of the characters in favor of a story that clashes with the lore of the saga and leaves you with more questions than answers. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a unique experience in video games, and a beastly expansion of what we knew in Breath of the Wild, with some moments that'll leave you with your mouth open and making you lose yourself in its world without even realizing it. So what about you? What do you think of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? Do you think it's the best Zelda game so far? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our latest videos of curiosities and analysis about video games. And here you can check out the latest ones. See you next time!